Okay, so we've talked about how the NAR settlement will be impacting Telluride home buyers, but what about sellers? Because logically speaking, sellers should be the ones who are benefiting the most from this, right? After all, it was sellers who started this lawsuit to begin with. But it's interesting that the way it's all played out, sellers are actually the ones who will really be impacted the least by this. So what do I mean by that? Directly speaking, yes, a lot of home sellers in the United States are actually going to be getting a check in the mail as a result of this settlement. I have heard that that check is going to range anywhere between $5 and $10, something along those lines, not exactly life-changing. But speaking in terms of how this settlement is actually going to impact the home selling process, like I've said a couple of times now, the only change that is directly impacting sellers is the fact that any offer of compensation from a seller to a buyer's agent can no longer be included in the MLS listing. So this does not mean that commissions are going away or that you no longer can pay a buyer's agent or anything along those lines. Sellers have always been able to negotiate their commission. They have always had the option to not pay a buyer's agent if they so choose. And just because it isn't going to be listed in the MLS does not mean it isn't going to be somewhat public information. It can be advertised absolutely anywhere else. And the way it's probably going to work in Telluride is it's going to be shared pretty widely via word of mouth. So now whenever a buyer's agent goes to schedule a showing, one of the questions they ask of the listing agent is, and what compensation is being offered, if any? But still, with the way that this has been portrayed in the media, a lot of sellers are still starting to ask the question of, can I just get away without paying a buyer's agent? And the answer is yes, of course. You've always been able to, you certainly can now. I am not personally suggesting that to my seller clients. It's a conversation to be had in detail with your listing agent at the end of the day to decide if it's right for you. My opinion is that there are a lot more drawbacks than benefits of this, and you likely won't be saving any money as a seller because that amount will likely be negotiated off of your asking price regardless. One important aspect to consider though is that because of this settlement, buyers are now having to enter into a compensation agreement with their agents prior to even touring your home. So whereas before it was just the buyer's broker who was the only one who had to consider what the compensation was, and oftentimes we didn't even check, we didn't know, we didn't care. Now it has to be a conversation between the buyer's agent and their buyer before entering your home. So that is something to think about when deciding how much you want to offer, if anything. At any rate, I think it's great that this settlement has really spurred these questions and detailed conversations between sellers and their listing agents and buyers and their buyer's agents. Increased transparency is never a bad thing. So if that's the biggest result from this, I think we're all going to benefit.